Crawford. Most of you will know me because Ms. Hill is my mom. I'm also a member of the Centerpoint cheerleading team, and I'm a senior. Today we will be reading Chapter 12, The Fifth Worm. "Look," said Billy to himself, staring down at the fried worm on the plate. "Be sensible. How can it hurt me? I've already eaten 4. Tom was just scared. He's like that. He eggs other people on, but he never wants to do anything himself." "Give up?" asked Alan. "Come on," said Joe. "We haven't got all day." "5 more minutes," said Alan. "Then I win." "There's no time limit," said Billy. For the first time, he wondered what he'd do if he lost. Where could he get $50? But how could he eat 10 more big, fat, ugly, soft, brown things? He couldn't ask his father for $50. He heard Alan and Joe whispering together. "He's gonna quit. Yeah, I knew he'd never make it. I bet with him. He talks big. Him and Tom are just the same, but they never do anything." Billy gritted his teeth, globbed on ketchup, mustard, salt, grated cheese, whatever was in the crate, anything, everything, and then grabbed the worm, tore it apart with his hands, and stuffing it into his mouth, chewing and swallowing and gulping, then panting. He reached out and wiped his gooey hands on Alan's trousers, grinned up messily at him, and said, "There, 5. Now on to Chapter 13. Nothing to worry about. That night, Alan asked his father to show him $50. After that, he couldn't sleep, tossing and turning his rumpled bed. Suppose he lost. He could just see himself asking his father for $50, begging it, on his knees, tears streaming down his cheeks, and then, at Thanksgiving dinner, cringing, while his aunts and uncles and cousins roared over his father's story of Alan's bet. He slid out of bed and snuck down the carpeted hall to his parents' bedroom. "You got to wake him, Miss O'Hara. You got to," he whispered on the phone. "It's an emergency. I got to speak to him." Pause. "I got a hoarse throat, Miss O'Hara. That's why I'm whispering. Please." Pause. "Gee, thanks, Miss O'Hara. No, I won't ever call this late again. It's..." He waited, gnawing at his thumbnail. A board creaked on the stairs. Silence. "What do you want?" said Joe suddenly over the telephone. "Geez, I was sleeping. You woke me up." "Joe, suppose I lose. My father will never let me take the money out of his savings account. I know he won't. You think I'll lose, Joe? Huh? Joe, tell me. Give it to me straight, Joe. I don't know. I can't sleep." Joe sighed. "Look, I told you this afternoon. You got nothing to worry about. He's cracking. Sure, he ate that one today. Sure, he might." Chapter 14. The Pain and the Blood and the Gore. 4 blocks away, Billy suddenly found himself in a brightly lit butcher shop, jostled by a crowd of enormous pigeon-breasted middle-aged women, shouting to make himself heard over the din of their chatter, and the roars butchered ordering about the weasel-faced boys, who were lugging haunches and tubs of meat in and out of the refrigerator room in the rear. Then a butcher saw Billy jumping among the women and asked for his order, and Billy gave it. And suddenly he was shoved up close to the chopping block, and the butcher slapped down 10 black worms as big as snakes, and Billy tried to say they were too big. He'd choke on them, but the butcher didn't hear him over the thumps of his cleaver, and the din of the women, and the hoarse shouts of the other butchers. And before Billy knew what was happening, he was seated at a table in Longchamp's restaurant in Times Square in New York City, with a large napkin tied under his chin, and a waiter was uncovering a platter on which lay one of the huge black worms, coiled snakily, a red rose wobbling in the center. "How could I ever finish it?" said Billy, and cut into a mammoth coil. Steaming pink juice flooded out. Billy ate and ate and ate and ate, and then looked, and he must have eaten more than that. And then he looked again, and there was no hole at all. He had eaten and eaten and eaten, nothing at all. And then he felt something cold on his ankles, and looked under the tablecloth, and there were 2 more of the huge worms around and around his ankles. And then he felt something weighing down his arms, and he looked up, and there was another worm around his arm, glaring at him with its bloodshot eyes. And from everywhere in the vast room, winding behind the tables, waiters approached carrying huge silver serving platters. Billy opened his eyes. For the first moment, in the moonlight flooding his bedroom, his 2 bare feet sticking up off of the bottom of the covers looked like 2 huge white worm heads. Then he realized that he had been dreaming and sank back into his pillow, the nightmare melting away. There were no huge worms as big as pythons, and he was home in his bed. His parents were asleep in the next room. His stomach rumbled. But suppose Joe hadn't been lying. The hair stood up on the back of his neck. Or suppose Joe had made it all up, but had been right anyway without knowing it. A shutter banged. Billy glanced out the window and saw the moon riding among the tossing leaves. His stomach grumbled and growled. He groaned. Suppose he was dying. He'd heard of people waking up in the middle of the night with pains in their stomachs, and then the windows turned gray, and the dawn they'd died. Toadstools, soured lobsters, tainted pork. That was a pain. He clutched his stomach and, groaning, half fell, half staggered out of bed and hobbled towards the door, bent double. Maybe there was an antidote. He whimpered. It didn't hurt a lot, but nothing ever did to begin with, did it?